Hi there. In this video, we're going to talk about the method of completing the square. And we're going to look at it in two different ways. We're going to apply it to a function, this function over here, and then we're going to apply it to an equation, this equation over here. And you'll see that when we have an equation, we can do it a little bit differently. So I just want to illustrate the differences here so that we can see what's going on. All right, so here's our function, and we're going to apply the method of completing the square to write this quadratic function in standard form. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure your function is written like this. If you have a quadratic function, you can always write it so that it's a number times x squared plus a number times x plus a number, right? So you're going to want to put it into that form. Once you have it in this form, what we're going to do is we're going to take the first two terms, the x squared term and the x term, ignore the other number. All right, so just look at these. We're going to factor out the number that's in front of the x squared, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to factor out that 2. So you notice if I multiplied back through here by 2, I'd get back up to this. That's how we know we factored correctly. Okay, so now that I factored out the 2, what I'm going to be looking at is the thing that's inside these parentheses here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this number in front of the x, take 1/2 of it, and square it. Right? So 1/2 of -4 is -2. -2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 here. Now if I add 4, I've changed the function. It's not the same function anymore. I don't want to change the function. I want to keep it the same function. So if I add 4, I have to also subtract 4 to preserve the function that we started with. Now what we're going to look at is these 3 terms over here. This magic trick that we just did, where we halved this number and then squared it and added it, that produced a perfect square. So this expression right here will be a perfect square. So factor it. This one factors as x minus 2 squared. And then we have a -4 on the left over. Okay, great. Now what we need to do is distribute this 2 back through. All right, so oh, cool. All right, so now we have some like terms. We can combine the -8 and the 3. And we have finished. We have completed the square. Okay, so in this case we have an equation. Okay, so when we have an equation, we have a few extra tools at our disposal because we can use algebra and do the same algebraic operation to both sides of the equation, right? So remember before what we were interested in is just focusing on the first 2 terms, right? So this +7 is kind of in the way. So what I'll do is I'll subtract 7 from both sides of the equation. All right, great. Now, remember what we did before. We factored out a 2 from these 2 terms. Well, here what I can do, I can actually divide both sides of the equation by 2. So instead of factoring, we just divided. And now I can do that trick that we learned where we take half of this number, which in this case is -2, and square it, which gives us 4, and add it over here. Now what we did before is we added and subtracted it. Well, what we can do here instead is just add it to both sides of the equation, right? So I'm going to add 4 here and add 4 here. Well, -3 plus 4 is 1. So I just added 4 to both sides. And then we realize that this is a perfect square. So we can write this, we can factor it. And now we've completed the square on the left-hand side. All right, so we've seen the method of completing the square applied in 2 different contexts. One where we had a function, and the other one where we had an equation. Now, why are we doing this? Well, when you have a function, completing the square is a great method to find what the vertex is and what the axis of symmetry are. Right? So those two things are very immediately obvious once you've completed the square, and so it helps us graph the quadratic function. Now, if you have an equation, what you're doing is you're probably trying to solve for x. All right, once you've completed the square, the next few steps involved to solve for x are pretty easy. In fact, if you look at the example we just did, it's a good exercise for you to just solve that for x. You'll see you can get the answers, there's actually two of them, pretty quickly. Also, one really great exercise for you to do is to take a polynomial equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 and use the method of completing the square to solve for x. Not knowing what the numbers a, b, and c are, leave them as variables. Now, if you go through the same method we just did, complete the square, and use that to solve for x, you'll find that you have just derived the quadratic formula. So that's a really good exercise for you to do. Derive the quadratic formula by completing the square on that equation.